So hello and welcome. And today I want to speak a little bit about numbers as adjectives, right? So let's get a hang of this, and let's get a thinner pen. I want to talk about numbers as adjectives, right? Numbers as adjectives. And so what are we going to talk about when we speak about numbers as adjectives? Um, just put this on a line. So what I wish to do is do a basic review of some arithmetic properties, and in order to do that we got to talk about numbers as adjectives, and this is the way that most people use them. Okay, and if you think about what an adjective does, an adjective modifies a noun, right? Adjectives, they modify nouns. What do we mean by that? My bad, sorry. Not nouns, but nouns. They modify nouns. In other words, they describe nouns. Now, firstly, when we talk about a sorry, my bad. When we start speaking about, I just put a number line there, and I'm going to get the number line to continue as such, and I'll just put some lines over there. Okay, so let's put some numbers in there. That's 0, that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. You can have a number such as the number 2, right, spelled TWO, either describe a noun as an adjective, or it could be a noun in itself. So let's, for example, put a point here and call this point P. I'm going to call this point P. I'm going to put a P over there. I'll put P there, and that's my P, right? That is the point P. Now what I'm going to do with the point P over there is I could say, well, P is named 2, or the point 2 is named P. Either way, this is giving us an example of where 2 is used as a noun. Right, so if I were to go down, that is actually, in this case, the point P is named by the number 2. That is the name. So it's a naming word, and therefore it's a noun. But I can also use it, for example, and say, well, let's get a shape in there, and let's look at the number line again and say, oops, let's just get some straight lines in there, right? Assume that all of those are equal. And I've again got 0, 1, and 2, and 3. Let's talk about this distance between point 1 and 3. That distance over there. What's the distance over there? Well, that distance is 2, right? And here we can say in example 1, we've named the point 2, or the point P, as 2, and therefore it gave us a noun or nominal effect. And then in this one over here, we can say that the distance between 1 and 3 is actually 2 units. And so in the second example, we can say that 2 is an adjective. We can say that 2 is an adjective that modifies a noun. Okay? It modifies a noun. And what is the noun that it is modifying? It is modifying, and if we want to be very specific, we can say it's actually modifying distance, right? It's modifying a distance between, call that point P and that point Q, between P and Q. So here you can see that this is the way that most people use it. They use it as adjectives that modify, and by modify I simply mean that it's measuring. Okay, it is measuring. It could do different things. In this case, it is measuring. It is measuring that distance, right? Okay. So firstly, a number can be used as a noun in terms of language, and it can also be used as an adjective. Now I want to go on to the next page and see that most people use nouns. Most people use nouns. I'm sorry, not nouns, but use numbers as adjectives that modify nouns. So most people use numbers as adjectives, right? So let's use 3 examples. For example, you can use an adjective such as 3 people, right? So for example, I've got Johnny, I've got Joseph, and I've got Yosha, right? Right, so I've got Johnny, I've got Joseph, and I've got Yosha. So that's 3 people. Or we could say you can even talk about having, let's make it green, let's have 3 apples, right? You could even have 3 apples. There's apple number 1. Um, no, my apples look very bad. That's apple 1, that's apple 2, and that's apple number 3. So 3 people, 3 apples, or 3 cars, whatever the case may be. Now a number is being used as an adjective. Okay, there we go. 3 apples, 3 people, 3 cars. Right, now I want you to think about something. Here's a quick question. Have you ever seen threeness? Not really, on its own, hey? On its own. Have you seen, my bad, sorry, have you seen threeness on its own? Double E over there. Okay, think about that. Okay, you may pause the video and then come back to this. Right, in the meantime, I'll move on. So, another concept to think about. Have you ever seen time on its own? Generally not, because both threeness and time are quantities that you've got to that are used as adjectives to measure other things, that modify nouns, the time taken for something, or the amount of something else, and that's how we generally use numbers. Okay, but like I said in the previous example, if we go back, you can see that 2 over here is used as a noun. Okay, so let's move on. Right. Now, I think it's very clear to you by now that numbers are adjectives, Numbers are mainly used as adjectives that modify, these are English terminology, that modify nouns. I keep writing nouns. Okay, so I'm going to raise another thing right now and ask you guys, how big is a billion and how big is a million? Okay, so a million versus a billion. Okay, now by this time you're saying, Imad, both of these numbers are very big, hey? Both of them are very big. But the big question is, are they really very big? And let's have a look at that. So as you know, a million usually has 6 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right? And a billion has got 9 zeros because it's 1,000 millions. Right, there we go. That's a billion, that's a million. Now, next question. Let's see what we can do with this. Okay, there's my million, there's my billion. Let's see. Well, I'm going to tell you a little secret over here, and the truth is, we actually got to consider it in terms of the noun that it's quantifying. A million versus billion is only big. A billion is only bigger than a million if it is modifying the same noun. So what is the same noun? Let's talk about seconds, right? Let's talk about seconds. Let's talk about seconds. If we speak about seconds, some basic arithmetic will tell you if I want to see how many seconds is 1 million seconds. I mean, what is a million seconds really worth? And some arithmetic will show you it's approximately just less than 12 days, while a billion seconds is 1 billion seconds is roughly less than 31 years. Okay, there we go. 12 days and 31 years. There we go. Right? So sometimes a million and a billion may be easy to confuse, and you may not be sure as which one is bigger, But when you're quantifying the same aspect or the same noun, like we've done in this example, for example, we took seconds and we said a million seconds is roughly 12 days, but a billion seconds is roughly 31 years. It's very, very unlikely that you'd be confusing 12 days with 31 years. Okay. Because, of course, if you have a million seconds is 12 years, 12 days, you got 1,000 millions. So it's like multiplying 12 days by 1,000. Okay. Okay. So in this example, 1 billion is clearly bigger than 1 million. So now I need you to think about the next thing. Is a million always bigger than, oops, wait. Let's pull up an eraser there. I mean, is a billion always bigger than a million? Now, at this point in time, I want to ask the class who says yes and who says no. So, by show of hands, who says yes? Okay. But who says no? Who says neither? Okay, well done. If you said neither, then that's correct, because the reality is we need to, it depends on the noun that we are modifying. Okay, so the reality is a billion, and the answer is it really depends. A billion is not always bigger than a million. It's only always bigger than a million if it modifies the same quantity. If it modifies, and I'm going to put there yes, if it modifies or describes or measures. Modifies, that's an FI, okay? If it modifies the same noun. So what are we saying? We're saying if you have the same quantity, you can compare a ratio. And a ratio that you compare, for example, 1 million seconds is less than 1 billion seconds. Right. Okay. But what if I spoke about a billion seconds, 1 billion seconds? Actually, let's just get a different color in there. Right? Let's see, if we spoke about a billion seconds, 1 billion seconds, ups, 1 billion seconds versus 1 million days. Okay, now I want you to work out the first question is how many, if you assume that there is 400 days in a year, how many years is 1 million days? Right? How many years is 1 million days? And I want you to just think about that. And then in this case, you should come out to an answer that tells me, well, 1 billion seconds versus 1 million days. If you have a billion seconds, and I'm going to just use some green over there, 1 billion seconds is roughly equivalent to 31 years, right? Whereas 1 million days is roughly equivalent to 2,500 years. Okay, so in this case, 1 million is bigger than a billion. And so we come down to a fundamental principle that I will introduce in the next lesson, where it says that, well, a billion's only bigger than a million if we modify the same noun, if we describe the same noun, or if we're counting the same things. Okay, for example, 2, the number 2 is bigger than 50 if we consider 2 rands versus 50 cents. Okay, and we'll get a few more uh, intuitive examples in the next lesson. Okay, all the best.